the suspense I felt.
Happy Sunday, everybody.
Hey,
Good evening.
How you doing today, Andrew?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing just fine. It's the second Sunday of Advent. What do I have to complain about?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely
For sure.
stinking
Not
nothing.
Christmas.
Not Christmas. It's not Christmas.
Yeah.
It's Advent still.
That's right.
Chad, you driving back from another meeting?
driving back from the old detox meeting. Yep.
Were the Packers playing tonight?
I think they played earlier today against the Bears, and from my understanding, they won. But I don't pay attention. So.
Okay. I guess the Vikings won today too.
Oh.
Against the Jets. And it's only relevant for me because everybody around me is a Vikings fan. And
Right.
one of my classmates from high school, I think, is the center for the New York Jets. So that's kind of cool, I guess. Yeah.
That's
Nice.
Really, that intro music there is suspenseful, I tell you.
Yeah. Well, I'm still mooching off of Jacob's StreamYard account, so he set that up, and I'm too lazy to, put that with like Gregorian chant or whatever. So we're just gonna keep it. And
I was gonna say I could send you a recording of some chant or something you could put on there.
I could. Maybe after Christmas. That week after Christmas, nobody needs a priest the week after Christmas. It's great.
Really?
Yep.
They're all cured or something like that, right?
Yeah. They're just. Yeah.
So, did you have a good week?
I had a pretty good week. Went up to a small town about an hour and a half north of here on Thursday night and had spiritual direction. Yeah. My spiritual director gave me a little attitude adjustment. It's kind of like like a chiropractor. You know, they just kind of throw you over the bench, and whack, whack, and everything's back in shape. And so that was real good. That was real
Sounds
good.
great.
Nice.
And then we yesterday we had this vendor fair, like a Christmas vendor fair at our church, where we had 75 different booths set up and people hawking their wares. And when I told my dad about it, he made an uncomfortable allusion to the Gospels and the money changers and merchants outside the temple, and asked me if I had if I drove them out with a whip, and I said no.
Like,
Oh,
there's
boy.
enough table flipping going on around here.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Wow.
Good stuff.
Did you lay tile this week, Chad?
I did lay tile this week, and I'll be laying tile again tomorrow and into the next week. And God willing, the next 25 years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But last night, so a friend of mine in the program, I got a random text from this guy. He says I got some tickets for this event at a planetarium. We can't go, and so I thought you might be interested. And so I asked my wife, and she said, "Sure, we can go." And I think I went when I was a kid. I went to a planetarium, but I don't really remember it. So we went, and there was this show where. So okay, first of all, I'll just say this: the whole time, all I can think about was the dome in the top of a church, and um, Jonathan Pageau. That's all I could think about, and Christ the whole time. And it was like I had like this creative revelation that if I had the crew and the money and the time, I think that the Planetary Dome movie theater is a very highly underused technology.
Like you would, like show planet. I mean, how would it be different than a planetarium?
Okay, so at the planetarium, there's a dome. Have you ever been to one of these?
I have not, but I've seen enough movies where they're featured where I think I know the concept.
So it's like a dome that's a movie screen,
Okay.
and they there's a certain type of style of film that you would play on.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they do like National Geographic type stuff, like flying down into the Grand Canyon or whatever. Maybe you're underwater. It's like an immersive type experience
Right,
because
right.
you're really close to the screen, and it's like 57 feet across. And it's just a big circular screen. And it's concave, and what got me started on this, like I was excited about it, but the guy was like the guy that made this show. He was like a Grammy winning musician, and so I thought, oh, this would be interesting. And it was just like geometric shapes, and like everything was arbitrary and meaningless, and you're like flying through these different shapes, and it was like it dawned on me like this is what Jonathan Pageau is talking about when he got disillusioned with art school. Like
Mm.
everything about this particular film is arbitrary and meaningless. It's really like it almost to me felt like a cry for help. It was super new agey, like you can change the universe with your mind type stuff. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
ugh. But what I thought of was that experience I had at St. Stan's when I walked into the church and was struck by awe. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if somebody made a film for this format where it's like something like the ancient church or something.
Like
It's
you're
not
you're
as
walking you're walking through the cathedral at Chartres, and just, maybe you've got Bishop Barron in the background saying, "Friends, welcome to the wonder of Western civilization," something like that.
well. That's one way to do it, but I was thinking something more like not a documentary, but like let's say it takes the images on the church and turns them into three-dimensional scenes, and like literally, I hate to use this word, but something like a psychedelic trip through the cosmos, um, through the the iconography of the church, and telling, getting the entire cosmic story, um, with like chanting, like the Gregorian chants and everything, like a full. So it's like a peek into the divine from a secular perspective, right? Because it's like not everybody's going to walk into a church, right? And not everybody's not everybody who walks into a church is going to understand the story, or that the church itself is telling a story. Excuse me. And so I thought, wow, how cool would it be where it's like you're fully immersed in like this experience of being walked through the Gospels, or through the beginning of time till Revelation, with this kind of uh, technology. Maybe there's no actors even. Maybe it is all like animated or something. I don't know.
So this
It
is
would be
like Fantasia in a planetarium for Jesus.
yes.
Okay.
Now I'm probably sure that's heretical for somebody,
I
but I
don't
don't know.
know.
That's an
I don't.
interesting idea.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, I was like, so Fantasia was what my mom put on for us when she wanted us to take a nap, because we had it on VHS,
Hmm.
on video cassette, and I would never actually nap. I have a hard time napping to this day. I would just sit there and watch it though. So anyway, I think if you, I mean, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it could work, but you've gotta get the resources to do that. There. Mark
Right.
says they usually use them for space shows about the stars. Production of
Hmm.
those things costs a fortune. I
Yep.
imagine they do. And is that the production of the planetarium itself, or like even the film? I imagine is really complicated to shoot. Although it might be easier with computer generated images. Computer generated images have their own problems.
Yeah.
Um,
A guy contact. I put it on Boxer. And Joseph was like, check this out, and this company called like 360 something, and they say if you got a project in mind, we'll help you figure it out or whatever. Of course, you'll have to have the money to do it, but so I was just, my grandiose mind is like, oh, you should talk to Jonathan Pageau and some other folks and see if they'll produce it, like a fully immersed story through iconography or something.
Yeah. Yeah, this sounds like an IMAX screen, only more so. Now, do you
Right.
stand there? Like, is this
Wait,
something we need to get done in 30 minutes because people don't want to stand any longer than that?
no, no, no. You're sitting in like these recliners there. You're totally kicked
Okay, so
back.
you're just, yeah. It's almost like ancient people sitting around watching the stars, huh?
That's right.
Do you
Pretty
remember do you
much,
remember the
yeah.
stars, guys? You ever seen those before?
I've seen one or two.
One or two
Well, that's
sickly
what I
little
mean.
stars?
You can have it be like, like the way my mind put this story together is you start a small group of people build a village, and they build a church in the middle of the village, this is all time lapse, and you build the village around the church, and then all of a sudden you walk into the church, and as you walk into the church, it goes into like on day one where God says, "Let there be light," and it was good. and then like the light starts, and then like you just go from there into and I think you'd have more questions than answers when you walk out of a film. That would be my hope. It'd almost be like haunting and like kind of like, wow, what the heck did I just watch? Like intrigued, bothered with intrigue.
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea for sure.
Yeah. Gosh, I'd
Who's
be.
gonna give us some money?
Oh boy. Yeah. Listen, guys, I don't know what you guys think is going to happen, but inflation's not going to slow down. I'm sorry. It's going to be a rough couple of years. Perfect time to be building a church right now. That's my predictions anyway. And so if I could be wrong, I'll take that. But
Well, you really make
Yeah.
me feel very secure in my mortgage, sir.
oh, don't worry. Your mortgage will someday afford a house, a loaf of bread. We'll just say $300,000. That'll pay for a loaf of bread. So everybody will be a millionaire.
Yay! I can't wait.
Yeah. That's
Mark
exciting.
says it's the best time to have a mortgage. So
Okay.
yeah. I didn't mean to throw you into
I have a
existential
job, too,
angst.
so that's good.
I
Well,
frankly
what
spend
else
too
is
much.
new?
Yeah, I frankly spend too much time reading financial news,
Yeah.
heavily slanted towards the disastrous. So
Is that what you do with your free time mostly?
that bridges of meaning,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, I did Christmas cards on Friday though.
Oh, nice. Oh, I should get to that.
Yeah, Christmas cards. It's great. It's great. And the wacky thing is that as a priest, I've got maybe like 80 or 90 people that might not even be that much. It might be more like 60 or 70. I haven't looked at the numbers recently that I send cards to as a rule, but I have to order 200 cards because lots of people at the parish give me them. And I'm like, oh, Christmas cards are important to you. Let me send you one of mine.
Yeah.
So,
Are your Christmas cards the kind where you have your family on it and
yep,
that sort of thing?
all of the important people.
You're oh. Yeah, all of them.
I don't know who else I would put. I mean, I guess I could take a picture with my parents.
Yeah.
Do that. Nobody would complain or think it's weird, but I usually just
I
have
think-
me looking holy.
Yeah, that looks good, I think.
Are you able to have a pet?
I
Yes.
could. I don't think I would, but I could. Yeah, I know priests who have dogs. I don't think I'd want anything more complicated than a fish, just because it's just another thing to worry about. Hopefully, I have like a neighbor
they
that
say-
has like a really friendly golden retriever that I could just pet whenever I need to pet a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. They say worry works 90% of the time. And I'm going to worry about roboting here now.
Worry works for what?
It comes true 90% of the time. Or it doesn't, it helps prevent what you're worrying about. So you can worry and it helps prevent what you're worried about. See what I'm saying? Never mind.
It could.
Yeah,
I
I mean, yeah. That's. I guess I look at myself and I don't think I need more things to worry about. I could frankly probably do with less things to worry about. So it's got to
Me too.
be. There are some people who should worry more. Chad's got a point, right? Like if you just worried about this a little bit, your life would be so much better. But you're temperamentally incapable of worrying about it, so your life is constantly chaotic.
Dang.
Is that what you meant, Chad, or am I putting words into your mouth?
No, it's like this joke, like with all that worrying and look, nothing happened. It's like It's one of these
Oh.
old timer AA sayings where they're like, "Yeah, worry works 90% of the time." It basically means all you do is worry, and nothing happens. So quit wasting your time on worrying.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Ah, I'm sorry I didn't get the joke and made you explain it.
It's okay. It's I care about you, so it's fine.
I also
Mark?
didn't get it.
Mark is coming out with the hard news that everyone needs to hear. Guinea pigs, like birds, are not real.
Well,
Thank you, Mark. You're so brave.
I've had
So
guinea
brave.
pigs.
They weren't real, Andrew.
Well, maybe they were the last.
It
guinea
was
pigs
an
on Earth.
NSA spy bot.
What about jackalopes?
Oh, those are totally real. We got them outside the rectory.
Oh, well, nice.
I mean, until I did the solemn St. Michael prayer over the entire, and the jackalopes went away. But don't worry
Yeah.
about that.
Interesting.
Hey, is that lady here who was complaining about my office? White bag's still sitting there. I have nowhere else to put it.
You can put it like in another spot on your desk.
No. But she's made it a problem. And, yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's what we do with problems.
Yeah, we just amplify them. Were you looking forward to Gaudete Sunday, Andrew?
Oh yeah.
You thinking
For sure.
you thinking your priest is gonna wear pink?
Probably, yeah.
I'm planning on getting my pink on. It's
I
pretty
don't see
great.
why not. You excited? Put your pink on?
Yeah, I mean the stuff we have here is okay. A lot of
Uh-huh.
these parishes, you know, they look. I know technically it's supposed to be called rose, but if you take any 4-year-old and ask them what color that is, they're going to say pink, and I'm just not going to run away from that. So thank
Yeah,
you for your
yeah.
input, Jordan, but it's pink.
It's pink.
It's pink.
Is there a cape on it?
I thought it was pink.
Yeah. Mark says pink priests not a good look, but it's traditional. Mark. Anyway, what do you know? What do you know?
Does it have a cape? Because I was wondering if my pastor had an obsession with Batman as a kid. Because like all of the robes he's wearing, they seem to have capes. And I thought that's pretty cool. I wonder if that's where the Superman and Batman cape came from liturgical garb.
I don't know. We do not. It's more like a poncho than a cape. Yeah. That's why
Mhm.
Baptists don't baptize kids. Oh, that's why Baptists don't baptize kids. Okay, I thought it had something else to do with something else. So yeah, but the stuff we have here looks pretty decent. It's not like the $100, 100% polyester stuff I've had to deal with in other places. It's a little nicer.
Oh, your
Our
liturgical
rose,
robes?
our rose vestments, our liturgical rose vestments.
I never thought that the priests looked bad in rose vestments.
Yeah, and you only get to use them literally 2 Sundays out of the year. It's like
Yeah,
you
it's
gotta.
a short window.
Yeah.
I think
But
that's
there's some
awesome.
priests who are like, "Oh, I don't wear pink."
Where does the traditional vestments come from?
Basically, formal wear from like 5th century Rome. So like the traditional chasubles, it's kind of like an outer garment, something that you would wear to, stay warm and keep the rain out. And then the dalmatics that the deacons wear, those had sleeves because it was for the table waiters, and they needed to be able to reach over the table and like pull cups and plates off and put dishes on it. So they had sleeves on their vestments, and so it's okay. The deacons are the ones who assist the priests at the altar. They should be wearing these dalmatics. And white robes, I think were used in Roman triumphs, triumphal procession, and since Jesus is the best winner of all time,
Oh yeah.
we wear white. So anyway, that's my that's some Father Eric theology there, and Father Eric history, I suppose. But
I appreciate that.
we'll see if it's any good. And things have changed a little bit since the 5th century. Like over time, the vestments changed cut and changed shape, and they started like using stiffer material, and then it all changed in the 1950s for some reason, and then there was like more lace and less lace, and can we use polyester and all this exciting stuff.
I'm glad they don't have like NASCAR patches and like sponsorships.
Yeah, that would be maybe kind of dangerous for anyone who's sponsoring them.
I mean, we kinda like. I'm going to see if I can pull up something here. All right. Let's take a look at this. We'll share screen. Screen 2. Share.
Ooh.
All right.
I've
Let's
done this before.
Zoom in on that one. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, we've got this image of the Holy Family there.
Yeah.
Hey, sponsored
That's
by the
kind
Holy
of like a sponsorship.
For sure. I like it.
Let's see if we've got. Here's another one, right? Gloria in Excelsis Deo. Check it out.
Wow.
It's kind of like a
Ooh.
sponsorship.
Gloria in Excelsis Deo.
We can get like ooh, I've got one. Guadalupe Chasuble. Yeah, there'll be something great on this. Check it out. No, they made her white.
What?
It's not supposed to do. Yeah. Hey, look at that. That's kind of like a NASCAR sponsorship, isn't it?
Radical.
I guess, yeah.
All right. Enough of that silliness.
Sure.
Church sponsored by
man.
Jesus, Mary, and the Holy Spirit. Oh, Mark, if you could study theology, you wouldn't say such silly things.
I mean, don't you study theology, Father?
Oh, I do. I'm chiding Mark. He refuses to learn anything about the Bible.
He so is working.
Oh, that's weird. I mean, I don't refuse, but that I usually don't get around to it very much.
You're going to church. That puts you ahead of Mark. We love you, Mark. We love you, Mark. You're my favorite gargoyle.
I try to listen to the readings.
Today I opened up at random to Esther, and there was another one of those wow. I can't remember exactly where it was, but I was just sitting there in church and I opened up at random to Esther.
Oh no, Chad's between towers.
No.
Sermons by Father Eric. Today's session sponsored by the Holy Spirit, moving you even when you don't know it.
Don't you always not know it?
When the marketing plans for y'all, and I'm not feeling the appreciation here. Oh boy, I guess we get what we pay for, right?
Yeah.
Wonder if Chad will be back. Wisconsin, they don't have very good internet out there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Hey!
I can see him, but can we hear him?
Oh, he's frozen again. Somebody's finally going to learn his secret
Can
identity.
you hear me?
There you are.
I could hear that.
He needs to
I
get
guess-
a cable connection to his phone.
Oh man, I don't really I've never really like had to go between towers where I live, which is interesting.
It's because you live in an overpopulated urban hellscape. Sorry,
Yeah.
just New Jersey.
Well, Yeah. I mean, it could be like that where I live, but there are a lot of rural areas.
I got a feeling we've got different definitions of rural here.
Well, not rural like what is it, Minnesota?
North Dakota.
North Dakota.
Yeah, North Dakota, you can go miles between any human habitation pretty easily,
Right.
especially the farther west you go. We've got more cattle than people here,
Wow.
which is great because, it's great. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it makes sense though, because we're the garden state, not the like mega farm state or anything like that. So little rural areas is fine.
Nice rolling hills. I have negative things to say about New Jersey, mostly because my memory of it was on a high school trip to New York City,
Okay.
and we stayed in Newark.
Oh yeah, of course you did.
Yeah, right. Because it was convenient, and there was a hotel that could afford that we
Yeah.
could afford for our high school trip and all that. But man, that was a ugh.
Just drive
Oh.
down south like 20 miles and you'll be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
It'll look great.
But yeah, Newark did not spark joy.
No,
you should say.
it tends not to do that. Yeah. Maybe that's why everybody thinks New Jersey's so bad, is they just fly through Newark all the time.
Yeah, could be.
I think, has Chad dropped completely?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if he was getting close to home, yeah.
Nice.
Mark, a true son of the Northeast, says New York City, Hotel Pennsylvania, across from Penn Station. Cheap, ideal, especially for a show at Madison Square Garden.
Okay.
Not planning any New York City trips soon, but who knows? Who knows what the future will bring? Maybe Chad will come up with his brilliant idea. All right, it's Mark again. He's
Hello?
oh, and Laura, you can come on here too, please, please.
No, she's busy
there's no-
fasting from computers.
No, she's in the comments.
She's literally in the comment section. She might be giving herself a break on
That's
Sundays.
impossible.
Okay, she's been hacked on YouTube then. That's the only possible explanation. Mark, I've been thinking about you were talking about so I made that comment on Jacob's stream that the church has been really consistent on calling out one particular type of evil. Hi Laura, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's Laura. Okay.
And
guess
if
I
you
was wrong.
haven't spent much time around Catholic people, especially women, you wouldn't know exactly all the pro-life work that they're doing. And
No, I
that's
do.
been extremely consistent since 1960 something.
Yeah, no, I get that. Well, and I would argue that pro-life is proper protesting, which is something I learned from my friend in Iceland, who knows English better than any of the people that live in the United States, Peter, who basically pointed out that protest is a positive statement about something. It's not an identification against something. And so you don't have the anti-abortion march. You have the pro-life march. And if you haven't heard the pro-life march from, I think it was 2019, when Ben Shapiro did the 10 points, they're the 10 most devastating, screw you, you're definitely scientifically, logically, rationally, and reasonably incorrect about abortion if you're not against it, arguments I've ever heard. Like they're rock solid arguments. Like you ain't got nothing. You get zero on any of the 10. Like and there's 10 of them. So like I get that, but I don't like that's still not calling out evil, right? It's calling out goodness, which is great. Let's do more of that. We need more of that, right? Like, but
I
also
think you're really
still they gotta
splitting
call out evil.
hairs. I think you're really splitting hairs here.
No,
From my
no.
experience, pro-life people are always calling out evil.
Yeah,
Well, the March for Life certainly doesn't do that. I haven't heard any of them actually call out anything. I mean, they say, well, we don't, we don't believe in that. Oh, okay, fine. Don't believe in that is, and from their perspective, this is strong language now. We're getting serious. Like Catholics are like that, right? But really, I mean, that's not, that's not enough. Like, come on, that's fine. Like, there's nothing in absolutely do that. Like, I'm not trying to say don't do the good things, do all the good things, but also do more good things and stronger because some, and not all the time. Like, but we're in a time now where everything has changed, and we haven't acknowledged. Well, we're doing things like we did them before, but we're not. It's not before anymore. Like things have changed.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for example, I've been trying to call people out on Twitter and such now when they go, well, I know what Elon Musk is doing. He's blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you have no idea what Elon Musk is doing. You're a moron in business compared to him, period. And I don't even, like, I'm an Elon Musk supporter in one way. All of his businesses except Twitter are stupid. Actually, like that's
And he's selling you the future.
He's brilliant.
I think I got that from you, but he's selling you the future, isn't he? That's his whole
Yes.
thing.
Yes, he's selling you the future, and like I'm not against selling the future plans for Mars and electric cars, but they're both dumb. Like, you know who's not going to Mars? You.
What makes them
for
dumb?
all values of you. You know who's never living on Mars? You, your children, or your children's children. Why? Because human beings will not ever be living on Mars. You will have to get a genetic modification or two to get on Mars. When that becomes possible, if that becomes possible, if we can get Mars terraformed, if we can figure out what genetic modification, it's on and on and on.
Mars has an inner core, right? That blew my mind when I figured out that Mars has an inner core. We have to deal with the occasional earthquakes here, and that's tragic and it's really bad, but it's worse than the world where there are no earthquakes, because the world where there are no earthquakes means that we have an inner core, and the solar winds will eventually strip the atmosphere off the planet. But with our molten moving core, it generates a powerful magnetic field that diverts the solar winds for the most part around our atmosphere.
You can fix that.
How
Let's just build one of those around Mars.
we just need to have
So you
outrageous
don't-
radiation shielding everywhere?
Yeah.
No, you don't know about the Van Allen belts?
Van
We can
Allen
build a
belts.
giant electromagnetic coil around Mars.
Yeah, no. The Van Allen belts are part of what you're talking about, the magnetic field that the Earth generates. But you can also put a temporary magnetic field in place or strengthen your existing magnetic field, which we may have done accidentally, if you set off these little things called nuclear weapons. And so nuclear weapons could very well be the thing that enables us to put an atmosphere on Mars. That is at least theoretically viable. But you still can't have a baby on Mars because the gravity's wrong. So you still need genetic modification to actually live there for any reasonable length of time. That's what I'm saying. So he's selling all these dreams, which is fine. Like I'm like, that's brilliant. He sells dreams. That's why he's the wealthiest man, because that's what money represents, is hopes and dreams. It doesn't represent the things in the here and now. It's Right.
Yeah.
See my video on navigating patterns. Just
It's
you
a
know, since
wonderful
you brought
video.
it up.
It had helped improve my cultural cognitive grammar, which
Excellent.
was
I'm glad to hear that.
delightful.
Right,
Yeah.
but the work he's doing with Twitter, for example, is actually super important. But judging, like believing for half an instant that Elon Musk was doing a poll to let on Trump or whoever else back onto the platform, and that was his plan all along, or his plan in a moment, you really haven't been paying attention. Elon Musk is at least as good, well, maybe not as good. Elon Musk may be as good as Trump at getting free advertising out of, for lack of a better term, the stupid people. Because really, at this point, Like you fell for Trump for 4 years. Every time he pulled the trick, you did it. Every single time. Every time he said something deliberately inflammatory, like hamburgers stacked up to the moon, you reported on it because you're that naive. You're that stupid. Because at a certain point, you're stupid, right? So Elon Musk does the same sort of thing, except he does it differently. But
He's smart. He's better at it. I think he's better at it.
I don't know that he's better at it, but he's certainly smart. And well, he get an enormous amount of money very quickly. So I mean, you can make all kinds of arguments for Trump couldn't get that. Trump started with more money and couldn't get that much more money. Yeah, fair enough. But the idea that he didn't do that on purpose, knowing full well that his plan was going to be, no, we're just going to basically let everybody back on who didn't violate the rules. You got to be a little dumb. Like, I'm sorry, but like, you really don't understand what's going on. Like, you're lacking long-term thinking, or you're not understanding theory of mind that other people have long-term thinking, even if you don't. Like, he planned all that from the beginning. And did he plan every detail out on a piece of paper before? No, but like, he has a very good intuition for these things. And I think that's the problem, is that there's a difference between like Elon Musk going into Twitter and injecting joy. Because he did. He injected joy. He brought back Babylon Bee, right? And all this stuff. In fact, I heard that earlier today. Like, there's a bunch of theories going around that the only reason why he bought Twitter was to put Babylon Bee back on there, because he understands full well that without satire, things corrupt, which is
Wait, what does
true.
injecting joy mean?
So basically,
Is this
I
a
mean,
drug?
this is something. This is something I heard. Right, is that the Twitter feeds in Japan had been primarily dominated by politics, but after he got some new moderators in there, they like overnight switched to being about video games and anime, which.
Wow.
You know, we have our rules here. This is a no anime zone, and we're just not going to do it here. But that does bring some people joy, I have to admit. So,
Right.
So yeah.
Well, it's a good question, Andrew, and I can't answer it. I can tell you what happened. I can't tell you how it happened, or like, what does joy look like? Do you have one on your shelf? Like, so one piece of joy that I have is this little guy, right? So this is one of my gargoyles.
Hold up.
How do
I get you?
Wrong one.
No, I don't know how to do it.
Me, damn it, me. Put me up.
I guarantee
you. Put me
I'm
up.
trying.
It's a good question for
There you go. Yeah.
So he sits on a desk, and the feet hang over the edge, or a table, or whatever, and he has a laptop.
That is sparking joy. Did Sally Joe make that for you?
Because I love gargoyles and I love technology, and this is the union of them. It's like the greatest object of all time, as far as I can tell, right?
Well,
so
you need to
that's
come to
a piece
church,
of joy.
but,
I think there's idolatry going on there.
Have you offered animal sacrifice to this one?
There's nothing in my ethos preventing idolatry, guys. Sorry, like that's a big deal to you, and it means nothing to me. But that's how you inject joy. I mean, this is one of the other strengths of Vervaeke's work, for example, is he talks about there are real things that are not material or physical, right? Like E equals MC squared is his example, which I think is dumb, but whatever. The point's correct, right? And so there is a thing called joy, and there was a day of joy. I think it was a week ago, Thursday or something, or it might have been Friday, I forget, where basically Twitter just exploded with joy. And Elon Musk is the one that caused that to happen very clearly. Like, it's not a hidden secret. It's not Gnostic knowledge from the past. It's just like that happened. And that's good. Like, this is great. So that definitely happened. Can I tell you how to reproduce that? No, I mean, I can tell you this laptop gargoyle brings me joy every time I see him. I can tell you that. I have another gargoyle too. I gotta find him. But I cleaned my office. That's bringing me joy, at least for the moment.
Alrighty.
Well, one of the things that I found most interesting about Milo Yiannopoulos' first visit back from his exile on Tim Pool's was he actually talked about joy. And he talked about like the Christian innovation. I never heard it put this way. I thought it was interesting. The Christian innovation was that came to Europe was a way of producing joy constructively. That through paganism, joy was brought about through revelry, right? So you'd have like a rave like experience, you'd have a crazy weekend, and that would bring you joy, but it would cost you something immensely, right? So there'd be sacrifice along with that, and Christianity brought with it a way to connect to joy that was constructive, right? That you could have a transcendent experience that would bring about joy, but it wouldn't come with that cost that of the burnt offering or of the weekend of revelry. So instead of getting this sort of Dionysian joy, you would have instead
The Holy Spirit,
the whole connection to the Holy Spirit, exactly, the Holy Spirit joy, right? The
against which there is no law.
So the Pentecostal joy maybe is a way of describing
Pentecostal joy versus Dionysian joy. That sounds positively scholarly. Yes, Pentecostal joy.
Oh dear.
So what if Father Eric, what if the failure of the body of the churches and the members of the church, right, to properly call out evil forces the hand of those in charge to do it, but poorly, like much less. And then, maybe this isn't as much of a problem in Catholicism today, but it's certainly a problem with the Baptists and a lot of the Protestants, right? Where you get those fire and brimstone preachers, right? Because now they're the avatars for all the evil that's not being called out. It's concentrated in one person. And so all of a sudden, instead of using plain language to say, that guy, what he's doing is no good, right? Now you get this spirit, right, injected into one person, the preacher, right? And it's too much. We can't use real world examples because it's the spirit of, say, 30 Congregationalists or all at once or something like that. And that has to come out as fire and brimstone because there's just too much energy in it, right? There's too much power, funneled into one person. And so the failure of people to call out bad behavior and or evil is causing sort of a imbalance, right? And I would call that a corruption, but imbalance is strong enough in the church in that particular way.
I'll let Father Eric.
Yeah,
I have something to say on this, but I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, I'm. So, a little bit of history. If you go to a place like Ireland or Quebec, one of these places that's had a dramatic collapse in Catholic practice, one of the commonly cited issues is that the priests were both kind of lazy, but also overly intrusive. They were kind of busybodies, right? And so you'd have these stories of, like in the 1960s, the priest would show up at your door and say, "Why aren't you having more children? Are you using contraceptives?" Which, like, that's a no. That's a no, hard no from Father Eric here. So I guess part of the delicacy that you need to call out evil with is it needs to be done in an effective way, respecting people's freedom and all that sort of thing. And it needs, I think different members of the body of Christ need to do this in a different way. Right?
Sure, absolutely.
So your clergy, like maybe they're the big guns, and if there's something like that really needs to be addressed, and it's like violating sacred principles, that's when the clergy would call it out. But the more worldly things. So anyway, that's a thought I've been having, and you told me to share my thoughts, and there I did. All of it being channeled into the preacher like in a positive feedback loop that gets really weird really quick, and then there's too much weight on the preacher rather than on the body. Like you're placing all the weight on the top of the head instead of evenly distributing on the shoulders and the back. Something like that.
Yeah. Well said.
I guess that's possible. I don't spend a whole lot of time in Baptist churches, so if you're seeing it there, perhaps it's there. But
I would argue that the traumatized Baptists are seeing it there, or we're seeing it there, right? And I would argue the traumatized Catholics were certainly seeing that, certainly in my family, right? In at least the French Canadian churches, eh? But
yeah.
also Italian Catholic churches as well. I guess I know a number of Italians. So yeah, I mean, I've seen that. I don't know how bad it is on the Irish side, although I've heard it's pretty bad. I mean, my mother's mother stayed in church forever, so she didn't have a problem with it. But she also divorced and never remarried, and trauma all over the place there for sure too.
Yeah.
She was a wonderful person, like really, really wonderful. Not that she didn't have a temper, didn't have her problems and all that, but yeah, she was a real. I mean, she paid real attention to other people, and she was really sensitive to the people around her, we'll say.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's always going to be it's a perennially difficult problem because I mean I look at somebody like James Lindsay, right? Like Mr. Anti-woke, and like that is what he does. He just spends hours reading critical literature so he can just destroy it, And I look at him and he just doesn't seem that happy.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
how can you be happy? But this goes back to Peterson's "Don't use the language of your enemies." It's like I agree.
I-
Don't use the language of your enemies.
I disagree that he's not happy. But like full of joy might be wrong, but he has zeal, right? He has a mission, and that means he has meaning and fulfillment. I certainly wouldn't accuse him of feeling meaningless or in some sort of nihilistic state. He's very much a mission-driven person.
I guess what I see and what I wouldn't want for anybody I care about would be that zeal without peace.
Yeah.
And
there's no mercy.
There's no and there's no like sometimes I get really wound up about something or another, and then I just go and I sit in the chapel and I pray about it. I talk to the Lord, and then I look up at the crucifix. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what it's like, and I can just kind of tune things down and all right, yeah, this isn't good, and that's what life is like. So I can return to that peaceful place, even while acknowledging evil.
Yeah, and it's important. And actually, I mean, to get to that larger points, I like how Mark used the term imbalance when bringing up this topic, because I think that's very key. And I'm obsessed, as you know, right now with the theological virtues, right, and of hope and faith, and how they need to be connected in opponent processing through the spirit of charity or love, right? And I think that what I see is an imbalance that has been aggravated by the birth of the Enlightenment and perpetuated, where we have some of the faith. I think Catholicism has gone in this direction. Is the imbalance has moved towards mercy, and what you see in a response to that is you see an imbalance within the Protestant movement of going too far into faith, of having this intense sense of zeal and faith, whereas in Catholicism we've gone too far into hope and mercy, right? So the hope and mercy, going too far into the hope and mercy, creates this passivity, right? In sort of like maybe a sense of lukewarm faith, right? Because you're away from the faith, you're into the mercy, you're forgiving, and there's room for that, and that's exactly what you're saying there. But with the Protestant response, or at least some of the Protestants, there's so many schisms, it's hard to talk about Protestant as a whole, but the Protestant response that I think Mark is alluding to is the intense faith and zeal that has been part of the response to that. Now, when faith and zeal goes into excess, it's easier to call out because faith is connected to actualization, right? So that becomes, you see a person acting out and being the firebrand preacher, right? You see them act. There's someone because they're taking actions, they can
The
easily,
avatar.
yeah, they become an avatar. They become accountable for those actions. They're to actually, part of faith is accepting the responsibilities for your actions. So you're actualizing your potential. So you're doing stuff, just like you were talking about that the priests in Quebec and going and sort of, you know, checking on their individual parishioners and looking in their dressers for any contraceptives that may be going on, right?
I don't know if it ever got that bad, but maybe it did, man. The old world is a different world, and I'm not used to it.
But that's my point of like that extreme faith. But the excess of mercy is harder to call out because it is the abandonment of responsibility and the abandonment of self into the collective, right? So it's you're when you're in a state of mercy, you're appealing towards the system or to grant you mercy, to release the burden from you. And so the excessive mercy is much more insidious. But I mean, it's to see what it looks like. We have fairy tales like Hansel and Gretel, right?
Right. Yeah. There's no such thing as a house made out of gingerbread.
Yeah, the gingerbread house where everything is permitted, right? Then what you see is that,
Right.
and
At the end of the day, the witch who can't have children and won't have children on her own just has you there to devour you.
yes,
Right.
Or
Right.
you see what's happening with the German church and the synod nationality, right? Where
that's just regular old communist takeover, march to the institutions.
Right, but I don't know if you guys saw the the Q&A that Vanderklay did. About an hour in, I got in on that.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because Ethan was telling me about something that I had heard from other people. And then we talked about my answer or his answer and my reply later. And Sally Joe came up with, well, I think part of the problem is people are substituting tolerance, or not substituting, confusing tolerance and mercy.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, no.
Yeah.
If you have tolerance, you don't need mercy because you haven't made a judgment. So that's not good. Right. And I think that plays into all this, right? Because I think the problem is that people are afraid to give mercy because they're equating it with pity and all these other things that are allegedly bad, which I don't think are bad, but anything can be thought of as bad, right? And that's the problem when you don't have when you don't have the ability to be merciful because you're too tolerant, you never get to mercy, but you feel like you've been merciful.
And what
Right.
the boundary that creates that stops the imbalance, what creates the boundary is the spirit of charity, right? Is the loving relationship. That's why St. Paul tells us that it's the primary virtue, right? It's the above the two theological virtues. It's the most one. Things just got a lot quieter. Am I still being heard?
Yes, you are. Andrew, we had some complaints about your clicking and background noise coming from your stream.
Okay.
So might I recommend a fine audio filtering service like Crisp for only $5 a month? You could have all of your background noise filtered out automatically using a computer algorithm.
Are you using
Use
Crisp right now?
promo code Father Big Mac for it. Oh, they had better send me some money for that.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm playing
It's
Civ
all
6
good.
right now.
Yeah.
Protestantism is spreading through the South. It's not good.
Okay. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. So I think you guys are actually pretty well describing the problem well. Because the way my man Thomas Aquinas talks about mercy is it is in order to have mercy be used properly, you always have to have reference to a higher principle which can take that action in. So
just mercy is the inverse of zeal, because mercy is the movement from faith to hope, right? Yeah. Mercy is only sensible if there is faith that you're drawing an exception to, right? That there is some law that's being broken or some rule that we're now bending. That's what mercy is, right? And of course, that's something that Christ endorses, as long as it's within that charitable relationship, and you're not destroying the law or replacing the law. You're fulfilling the law, right? That's what Christ came to do. The and zeal is the opposite movement. Zeal is the movement that takes us back from the hope, like the excessive hopes, to back to faith. No, it's like you guys are starting to talk nonsense. I need to actually, and that's what actually I think that would be what Elon Musk is bringing to Twitter, is he's bringing zeal, right? In this, like he is actually he is becoming the point of responsibility. He's saying this place is filled with nonsense. No one is accountable. I'm going to become the lightning rod of responsibility for the organization. That's the strong man or the heroic epic is that move towards faith of zeal, right? And if it's done correctly, he goes too far, then it will be good. But you can take the zeal, of course, to an excess, just like you can take the mercy to the excess. You can create an imbalance. But right now, the joy that Elon is bringing is the fact that he's bringing us. His zeal is recreating the balance, right? Is restoring the balance.
Yeah, and I guess having him in charge. Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't know if it's excess of mercy. I think I like what Mark said, how it's more like tolerance, because I think it is more like a tolerance that's being given of not even declaring what's wrong, not so much forgiving what's wrong, which is what mercy is.
Oh, it's the confusion between tolerance and mercy.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think that's like the false hope situation. Like that's when you're too already, the law's already been broken at that point, right? Because there's not.
If you are like some of the people that are more on the, I don't know if it's even tolerance, but there's people that would say when something's done wrong, they don't even say that it's wrong. They just there's no forgiveness. It's that wasn't wrong.
You can't get to mercy if people don't transgress. And if you have too much tolerance, nobody can transgress. And so everything's fine. And so we'll have drag queen story hour. Just and then if you speak up against it, they say you need more tolerance. And to those people, I say, you come here and try to give me tolerance. I'll show you intolerance real quick like. And they go away because they know I'll do it. And they know they're weak and can't withstand the force of my will. I mean, if you want to boil this down to force of will, you're all going to lose. Bad plan. Pick a better plan. Pick a religion that saves you from people like me, because that's who you need saving from, at least in this world.
Oh my goodness. That was another Mark moment.
I think that there's some like what he's saying there though. There's some interesting truth to that, because that's actually because he's bringing he's bringing in the intolerance. He's sort of stopping that Gnostic dream world, because like a part of it is they create these layers of socialization, of politeness. They're the Gnostic world they're creating can only exist in this bubble from heavily insulated from reality, from the bare metal of like finding food, water, and dealing with unpleasantries yourself, right?
You don't realize the differences between men and women if you're all sitting around, staring into the black screens. But when you have to go out and drive a horse or a plow behind two ox, it's like all of a sudden that upper body strength is kind of useful.
Right. Or you wanted to get saved from a building. Do you want a firefighter who is a woman who can't save you from a building, or do you want a large guy who can drag you out of the burning building? It's a classic example that's been floating around, right? And so, do I have tolerance for all female firefighter crews? No, I don't. Right? No,
this is
sorry.
And this is the hypocrisy of the Pharisees, right? Is this over I think is connected to this thing that Mark's talking about the tolerance or the imbalance of mercy gets you to that place where, that you are necessarily a hypocrite, because you're going to be speaking, you're going to be virtue signaling, you're going to be saying that you're tolerant of these things, but you can't actually function that way, right?
Right.
So
Right.
and you see this in the reality, right? So they'll talk about like, oh, we're doing all this hiring, we're doing this this
PR.
the HR stuff. We're doing all this hiring, based on, they're not going to say quotas. I forget their jargon, but basically, we're doing this diversity hiring. But ultimately, like, in the push comes to shove, they're still going to be doing some hiring based on merit to keep things functioning, right? So there's going to be there's going to be hypocrisy there in order for the system to function at all. And that's the hypocrisy of the Pharisees, right? In that sense of that Jesus was calling out, is that they would speak like he would, but they wouldn't actually they virtue signal. It's the common jargon for it now, but they would actually do the low cost thing of saying that they believe these things, but they wouldn't actually live them, or they wouldn't live with the consequences of them, right? So so you have these virtue signaling corporations are in that sort of situation where they don't actually, they'll put up their avatars, their Twitter avatars, and do all this ESG stuff as if they get away with, but ultimately they're not. They're hypocrites on the deeper level.
Right, but I mean, I think, and that's part of the problem. It's not like tolerance is not optional, right? And also a lack of tolerance is also not optional, because again, if you're too tolerant, you're not making judgments, and in order to do anything at all, including think as such, you have to make
separate the light
judgments.
from the darkness.
You have to make judgments, right?
Yeah.
And so people are all like, "Oh, we shouldn't be judgmental." It's like, no, that's saying you shouldn't act in the world.
Yeah.
Actually. So what? So hold on. I just want to make one point, Xander. Right? So what happens is they talk about tolerance, say over here, right? But then they have no tolerance over here, right? None, right? Because they've kind of pushed it all to one side, and then so. And this is the whole, look, what are you intolerant of intolerance problem, right? It's the same problem. It's just a different statement of it.
Yeah. That's actually the Marcusean repressive tolerance, or they have another.
He's a postmodern, Mark. You would hate him.
Yeah, and James Lindsay has a lot to say about him. And he's part of the reason we got into the mess. So it's actually a conscious tactic on a lot of the Marxists, what you're experiencing there, where they actually they know that they're applying this double standard tactically. Everything from the left needs to be tolerated, no matter how extreme. Anything that's not left, no matter what it is, has to be repressed brutally, right? That's
so the tolerance isn't universal, but they say that it is, because this is what postmodernism leads to. And we had a lovely chat with Hezi the other day about postmodernism and why it's reprehensible and has no redeeming qualities. I think that's really important.
But on just a word, what you're also I would say, Mark, is you're rediscovering faith, right? Or the faith side of the equation, because what I see the theological virtues doing is they're actually sort of the touchstones that form Vervaeke's 3 R's of like relevance realization. What is it? Recursive relevance realization. It's the recursive process of discernment, and what they're moving around between is faith and hope, and that's how you discern things. And the discerning side, the faith side of it, like what you're talking about, is all these words that have been demonized because they want to keep these false hopes alive, right? So there's other stereotypes. Like we can't live without stereotyping. Is literally
it's not optional. There's a lot of stuff that postmodernism destroys or tries to, that is not optional. That's true. But Vervaeke hasn't gotten to discernment yet. because he's just put it in the relevance realization box, and he's going to deal with that black box later.
Yeah, but so here's what's in the black box, or what I believe is in the black box is the stereotyping is simply taking multiple instances and generating a type that is useful for discernment, for casting, for then or discrimination. In other words, they've banded up. So, but if it's good faith, if it's an accurate stereotype of what you're trying to avoid or what you're trying to seek, then then the discernment or the discrimination will be good. The problem is with bad faith, with bad stereotypes that are going to create lots of false positives or false, is it false negatives, false positives? I'm forgetting my language, but basically you'll be lots of error, right? If your stereotype creates lots of error, then it's a bad stereotype, and that's a problem. But it's not a problem with the process; it's a problem with the original stereotype.
But if your identification system is negative, in other words, if you're only identifying against, and that's what people on the left do, right? They don't say, I'm a vaxxer, I'm a proud vaxxer. They don't say that. They don't say that. They say, you're an anti-vaxxer. They're not identifying for something or with something. They're identifying against something.
Yeah.
And so you can't create if you're identifying against.
Well, that's actually part of that, what I was talking about before, the that abandonment of responsibility of becoming the locust or the actualization, potentialization. There's responsibility if you're for something, right? Then you're actually sort of saying, I'm bringing this into the world. But if you are just, I'm against that, then you can sort of disappear into the crowd and the mob. And largely, like the left is for the system they're always demonizing. Like they're actually, their problem.
They rely on it. No, they're not for it. They rely on it because they're parasites. They're automatically parasitic.
Yeah.
So it's not what they're for or against. And all of this is unconscious. Like I don't like this. Oh, they know exactly what they're doing. No, there are some things they know exactly what they're doing, but most things they're just being ruled by the spirit. They have no idea what they're doing.
Well, I think the line between good and evil runs through every human heart, right? So there's some people who are evil, conscious. I know.
No, they don't believe that.
Yeah, I know they don't believe that. Yeah.
Right.
But but there are some people who are evil enough and ingenious enough that they have a pretty good idea of what's going on, and they're just functionally destroying the system.
I don't think so. And you don't even need you don't need that. Like you don't need the world to be fully rational. You don't need any of that, right? You just need 4 bad actors with different goals that lead to the same proximal goal, and then you have a riot in the streets. Like it's not that hard. They don't need to understand the other 3 groups. They don't need. You don't need that. You don't need that level of conspiratorial thinking. Like it's just not required.
Okay, but read George Lukács or Paulo Freire, and
books are evil. Not reading books. Yeah,
okay, but they are evil. They are more.
They're coming up with good descriptions and saying, well, this is an excellent predictor, like Brett Weinstein did, right? But they're going to fall into the Brett Weinstein trap that he fell into with Robert Wright, which is they're basically going to come down to a reductionist theory about how and why something's working that basically culminates in a conspiracy theory that is wrong, like Brett Weinstein did. Like that will happen. You're trying to over-rationalize, over-explain the world, and that leads to reductionism, and now you can't do anything about it.
Zurich asks, what do Paul and Jesus mean, Father Eric, when they say not to judge? How is it distinct from Mark's point about the necessity of judgment? So the way this has been taken up into the way we talk about these passages is to say that we could certainly judge the actions of somebody as being good or evil, helpful or unhelpful, worthy of emulation versus worthy of not emulating. That is something we're called upon to do, and it would be impossible to read the Bible intelligently without doing that. And if you don't believe me, read 3 or 4 verses from the letter of St. James, and you will find him judging all sorts of actions and behaviors at that time.
Yeah.
And what we really can't do is judge what people are going to do. what they are going to be like, what their final destiny is. Because even somebody who's as far away from God as you can imagine a human being, they are not at this point beyond redemption. They have the capacity to cease doing evil, begin doing good, and therefore the way that practically works itself out in the world is, you should always, insofar as you attend to your own needs, necessarily try to keep doors open with people. Not always going to be possible, but if it's something that you can manage without, let's say, destroying yourself, then it's a good thing. And then you can't ever say this person's beyond redemption, therefore we can simply dispose of them.
You also can't claim that in their place you would have done better than they did.
Ooh, dang.
Right. And I don't,
Yeah, that's true.
You have to judge for yourself. There's no treaty against judging for yourself, right? It's treaty of, and it's not even treaty of judging others. It's only treaty of making certain types of judgments in certain situations, usually about the future, not about the past or the present, what's happening or what's happened. And time is a real tricky thing because everybody keeps ignoring time, and then we end up with weird things like an explanation being equivalent to a prediction. A prediction is something you make about the future. An explanation is something you make about something that already occurred. And so you can get confused and say, well, this guy's got a really good explanation for why this happened, and therefore he must be smart. No, there's lots of explanations, good explanations for why all kinds of things happen, but a lot of them compete with one another. So it's very hard to tell when you're talking about the past if that person actually has any insight, or if they just have a bunch of explanations that aren't helpful to understand what's going to happen in the future.
Okay, so two things on that. Like Mark's made some extra points, but I want to go back to the whole judgment thing. First, I there, but for the grace of God go I. Now that's often interpreted now as meaning luck, like, oh, God's given me this grace of this luck that I've done. But I actually think that the origin of that saying is more along the lines of of having gratitude for the grace that one has attained, that has kept one safe, right? That actually, it's that grace is actually a gift that one actually has to work at receiving and maintaining. And so when you see someone in dire straits, that you're the origin of that saying was not really talking about luck. It's not grace. God doesn't give grace out willy-nilly. It's actually about, it's like, okay, well, that's an example of what happened because I have attained some grace and I'm grateful for that grace. And just on that, about how do we judge? I think, it's a big part, I think, of the prohibitions about judging is that like all judges are, all our judgments need to be deferred to the ultimate judge, who is Christ, right at the end. So we can't, and that's more what the prohibition about is. Like, you can't render final judgment. You're not, Christ is in charge of final judgment, but you're still called upon to discern. In fact,
judgment in the future. Final judgment would be judgment in the future.
Yeah.
Not judgment in the present for your action. Also, not judgment for your actions, right? Christ is judging everybody. He's not judging you, right? Except as a result of judging everybody. So that, again, this is there's two components. There's a time component plus the placement component, right? Judging other people can be problematic, although again, I would argue it's necessary for discernment. You have to have discernment, but making a judgment for you to make an action is very different from making a judgment of somebody else's actions, which is very different from making a judgment about what actions should be for other people in the future. Like, those are three different conditions with no overlap.
Yeah. So, but from, I was talking about the theological virtues, there's also, from those are the cardinal virtues, which are the result of the 4 R's and I think it's connected to Vervaeke's 4 P's of knowledge. But one of the and this is really important because this has been lost since the Enlightenment, especially over the last 150 years. We've really, the meaning of the word justice has drifted dramatically from the original Christian concept of justice. Justice, in the Christian conception, was an individual virtue, right? So this idea that justice is something you get from on high or from the state is completely alien to to Christian thinking. Every Christian is called upon to become just as a virtue. If you think about this whole justice, getting justice from a society, how on earth are we supposed to have a justice from a society if our society is not made up of just men, right? So the justice and discernment is something that you actually have to cultivate, and
right,
and that's getting,
well, but
it's
right,
something
but
we're
justice
bad at, but we have to build as a virtue. Yeah,
justice is the thing that requires judgment, right? And judgment
yeah,
requires discernment, right? So
yeah.
the three concepts are tied up and build on one another,
right? Yeah,
right?
and
Right.
it's and it's actually I think it's connected. Well, it's connected to the four beasts. I think are representative of also Vervaeke's knowledges. So it's the justice is the lion, the four beasts in Revelations. Like, that was a whole side thing. But it's justice is lion, but it's also in Vervaeke's model, it's procedural knowledge, right? So it's about bringing out the proper outcomes in the world, right? It's a kind of wisdom or sophistication where you're actually, like, the purpose of justice is to bring better outcomes out in the future in the world. Like, to correct the person, but also to correct the state of the world, right? And how you do that requires this sort of finesse.
Well, to correct the person, and you can ignore the world because it'll take care of itself.
Yeah, I mean, correct the state of affairs, right? I mean, like, the world may sound a little bit too
No,
grand.
correct you. You don't correct the state of affairs. You correct you. Everything else takes care of itself. Like, this idea that we have agency that far outside of our own is crazy talk.
Well, hold on.
We
No,
just
I mean, I'm not trying to correct the whole world here. I'm talking about, I'm called upon to be just of my flock, as a father, right? I need to be a just father. So I need to, when I am bringing about justice in my family, the way I do that is that I correct the character of my son or the transgressor, and I try and restore the order and peace in the family, right? That's what justice is, right? Is that, so it's more than just this me.
And restore the order in yourself, more importantly. Right, because as the result of correcting your children, you're going to have to transgress, and then therefore you're going to need to make up for that transgression as well.
Yeah, restore the equilibrium. Yeah, go ahead.
And also the inability to control another person's behavior or force them into an outcome that you desire for them. And that's a good point, because virtues are primarily something that would perfect our own souls, right?
Yes.
And it's certainly, being around virtuous people does help, like, with your own virtue, but it doesn't cause it. It's just, it's sort of a secondary causality. Now, what do you guys make of, we all hear, do not judge, you will be judged. But immediately after that, Jesus says, for with the same judgment you will pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured out to you.
Right. Right. Well, that's a treatise against hypocrisy. Right.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're gonna call somebody out for their lack of chastity, you'd better be chaste. That's it. Yeah. Right. So again, it doesn't say don't judge. It's not what it says at all. Just
be careful with your judgment.
Taking it out of context. Yeah. Right.
Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye but fail to notice the beam in your own eye?
Right.
Right. Jesus is a genius or something.
Right. That says judgment's okay if you apply it equally. Right. Yeah. Yes. Judgment's fine. No problem with judgment. Stop using it as a way around the responsibility to call out evil. because that's one of my big things, right? But make final cause great again, call out evil and do it poorly, right? These are two big themes with me, and also gargoyles. It's
Yes, a fine.
All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna get going. So
Andrew.
Out of the
I
Protestant.
tried to think of something funny to say about leaving and final causality and all that, but I couldn't. So
Okay.
See you,
Have you
Andrew.
cleaned up that Protestant problem of yours? Civ 6?
I'm taking care of it. I'll leave that to your imagination of how I'm doing that.
Okay.
So,
Very good.
All right.
Always good to have you, Andrew. You're my
Good to-
number one
good to be here.
customer.
thank you. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll see you next Sunday, I hope.
See you next Sunday. Yeah, I am planning on doing this. Not on Christmas though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
I
probably
don't feel
wouldn't
bad about that. Yeah.
either. Yeah. All right. Well,
All right.
have a good
Peace
night.
out. Yeah.
To bring it back
Are we going to get to this comment here or what, Father Eric?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think we've gotten to the bottom on justice. At least
In
as far as
judgment.
we need to go. We need to go as far as we need to go. We've got, I think, a new friend of the channel. I don't think I've ever seen this Jordan around. So hello, Jordan. Good to have you with us. Mark, can you go into the good living on two axes, both the qualitative and the quantitative? I wanted to hear Father Eric's thoughts. So I guess you go
Sure.
first and I go second.
That's right. I go first. To your channel, maybe. So,
I'm just
But-
not disagreeable enough to hang with you two, or
Confirm.
northeastern enough.
Or Northeastern. Well, that's a big problem.
Much too
That's
much
a
of
big
a
problem.
polite Midwesterner here. You know, I sure wouldn't want to make anybody feel bad by interrupting them. That would just be horrible.
You have your own manipulation techniques over there in the Midwest. We're well aware of your little tricksiness. So yeah, I mean, I find it the most useful way to visualize this is a horizontal and a vertical axis, right? So the horizontal axis is the axis of quantity. It's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then
Measuring too, right?
and measure. Well, you need counting to measure, right? And then that provides you the measurement. So all measurement is horizontal axis, all of it.
Mhm.
It's all quantitative or quantity, right?
Because
It's
I think sometimes people don't get the connection between quantity and measurement, but there are certain
it's good.
things
Yeah.
that are not measurable. You know, like
No,
how
we'll
much
we'll
did
get
you?
to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. It's good. It's a good call out, right? Like measurement exists on this horizontal axis, and then what's happening there is that's measurement allows you to make a distinction of good and bad, right? Or better and worse through that mechanism. Okay. But I think the way to think about it, and the thing that now Vervaeke's finally caught up to after like 3 years, is there's another axis, a more important axis, right? Which is the vertical axis. And I know people try to talk about this. They talk about qualia and the types of qualia, right? Very scientific. That's nonsense. It's quality. There's an axis of quality. The one feature or the one important feature of the vertical axis of quality is that it does not contain any measure. Measurement doesn't apply on the vertical axis at all, which is not saying much, right? But there's good and bad, right? There's good and evil on the vertical, and that seems to be how that works. And then you can do clever things with this, like Sally Joe did, where you have a man on one side and the man looks across the horizontal axis and down at the woman's feet, right? And the woman looks across the horizontal axis and up at the star above the man's head, right? And then she's pointing there, he's pointing down below, right? They can both see quantity, but quantity works differently for men and women. So for example, and I guess this is, I didn't read the book, but apparently there's an example in Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, where what happens is the man goes out, works on the car for 4 hours, the wife's car for 4 hours, gets it all fixed and spiffied up and cleaned and all that, right? Now, he comes in and he says, I've worked on your car, I changed the oil, I did all that, right? And in the woman's mind, he gets 1 point, okay? And now he rests for a while, right? And then the woman's like, "Are you going to take out the trash?" And the man's like, oh, "All right, whatever." And he goes like, "Look, I spent 4 hours in the car. What's going on?" So he goes and takes out the trash. Okay, and now in the woman's mind, he gets 1 point. So now he has 2 points. In the man's mind, he's like, "Man, my point quota for the week is done. I got like 22 points because I've spent 4 hours working on the car." Right? So they're both using a measure of quantity, but the quality value is different because the woman isn't assigning the quality value to the time. And so it plays out in real life. Like you can see these dynamics happening all over the place, not just between archetypal male and female, we'll say, but also in other areas where people are just, time is not the guarding factor. Like, and that makes sense because if you're a woman, it doesn't matter how long it takes to clean the house. You need a clean house mentally or you'll go insane. That's technically true, right? Whereas the man doesn't care, right? Like my office was a mess for how long? And now it's perfectly clean. So, I didn't care. The house is still a mess. The back room is full of all the stuff that was in the office. Who knows how long it'll take me to get through all that and actually clean it up, right? So the valuation is different because the valuation of quality is not the same as the valuation of quantity. And so it's very difficult to talk about which is better along the vertical axis, which is more towards the good, and which is evil or more towards the evil. It's very difficult to talk about.
Yeah, that is. I don't know how. I mean, it would always be like somehow like a measurement of virtue and charity, right? Like,
yes.
Like how much does this action glorify God if you're going to use good and evil as that vertical axis, right?
Right. And then I would argue you can't actually measure those things, right? And so there's two aspects in that case to judgment, right? Which is, are you judging the quantitative effect of something? And are you doing that in the here and now, right? Or are you judging the quality of what you said, right? And so, well, I went into this the other day. I thought this was a good example, so I'll use it again. When I ask somebody how their day is, right? Let's suppose I call up my uncle or something and I say, "Hey, how you doing? How's your day?" Right? There are two possible outcomes to that, actually. So most people think, "Oh, that's a nice act." Well, that's going to cheer him up, right? Because, somebody cares about him. If you're depressed, that may make you worse. You may commit suicide. I'm not joking. Like, this happens in the real world, like more often than you realize. If you don't know that I'm being serious, this happens. Okay, so you can't judge it by the outcome, right? You can't. Like, it's not possible. And also, the action may not, like, in the moment where I say, "How's your day going?" Say, "My day sucks. I don't know why you're calling," right? But that may only last for a few minutes, and then after you get off the phone, the day may improve for that person because you called and they were able to express their frustration. I don't know. I don't know. So how do you judge an action like that when you don't know what the outcome's going to be, and it could actually be the worst possible outcome? Because I would argue, to some extent, that's everything you do, right? Like, everything you do has that potential.
Which is why a virtue ethics system wouldn't put outcomes at the center, although they're not a matter of indifference either.
Right.
It's a matter of, am I in accord with this ideal? Am I aiming in the right direction? And that's all you can manage. That's
well, that's definitionally virtue ethics are don't put that at the center. They can still take them into consideration. That's if you're dealing with consequences, and that's consequentialism, right?
Which is always a horrible idea. You end up with trolley problems. It's the worst.
Yeah. Well, and that's. Did you hear Sally Joe's thing about the trolley problem? Somebody took her the trolley problem once, and I think she was in art school or something. And they said, here's the trolley problem. How do you resolve this? And she said, "Who's the idiot that came up with this? Like, this is a dumb question. Like, just don't come up with the problem." Yes, go Sally.
Don't tie
That's how you
people
solve
up
it.
onto railroad tracks. Like that's the solution to this
Right.
problem.
Right. Like that's the whole thing. Like if people are caught up in these fake examples of things that either don't happen in the real world or don't happen the way they characterize them, right? And then saying, well, see, this is a possible problem in the world. Is it? Is it really a possible problem of the world? Are you sure? Are
Your
you? Because a lot
pragmatic
of times it's not.
epistemology showing, Mark. Your pragmatic epistemology showing.
Yeah. Well, pragmatism for the win. I went over that earlier too with Jacob. So yeah,
Well, I think it's
pragmatism for the win.
actually. I think what the more insidious side of it is they're trying to reduce morality to pathos, right? Because they're actually saying, well, there's
That's
these
emotions.
urges, emotions, and I think that the fundamental part of Christianity is that it's the Pontius Pilate question that's put forward in Mark, and that is they have to choose between Jesus Christ, the sovereignty of the Logos, and Barabbas, the murderous revolutionary, which represents the supremacy of the pathos, which is like the doing the things that are my feeling over logic, over God. My feeling is supreme, and what you see in the insidious underbelly of these trolley problems, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to find urges. They're trying to find, it's like, okay, well, this is what's really going on. See, there's no logos, there's no God. What it all boils down to, all this frills you're putting on it, it's still just pathos. It's still just urges. You're still just like, you have like this intuition or this sense of what's right and
It's
wrong,
passion
right?
and it's emotion.
Passion,
It's not
yeah.
anything else, right?
Yeah, that's and that's what the trolley problems are trying to. It's not true, but that's what the trolley problems are trying to put forth or expel.
Like,
Right?
and also it's a manipulation to seem
Yes.
superior. It's
Yes,
like,
exactly.
right, because look, if I'm an agent in the world, and we're all agents in the world, I would argue, right? Like you were born into the world, now you're an agent of the world. Sorry, there's lots of downsides, right? There's lots of good stuff, but there's lots of downsides. But if I'm an agent in the world and I don't have ethics like Sam Harris, because Sam Harris never had ethics ever at any point, right? But I think I do, right? I'm going to throw the trolley problem at you to bring you down to my level, where you also don't have ethics because you still have to kill people. Ha ha! Now you're equal to me, right? It is this equaling because they don't want the judgment, right? Because any ideal is a judge, and they don't want judgment, so they have to get rid of ideals as such, not physical ideals. That's how Peterson talks about them, and he's right. But the implication of that is the concept of an ideal or a Platonic form, which is actually the same thing, has to go, because otherwise you're being judged, and you're being judged for your actions, and you're being judged by something bigger than you, because virtues are bigger than you. That's why you need distributed cognition to understand virtues. You can't get them from a book by yourself on your own with your own personal practices. You can't meditate your way into them. They're too big to understand. You need help. You need a church.
You can't grow in patience without the Dairy Queen drive-through taking forever.
But we are judging Sam Harris. I think that's what we've we've concluded.
Judging
Sam Harris.
I never bring Sam Harris up. It's always other people.
Well, I have a video on that.
Delightful Sam Harris-free world.
Two videos pointing out the error, because I think it's important to point out the error, because the Sam Harris error is an error we're all prone to. So it's important to know about it.
Yeah, I like what you said about, Mark. I like what you said about this idea that virtues have to come from distributed cognitions, that you actually can't conceive of a virtue by yourself. That's a very interesting idea. I'm probably gonna be playing on as I sleep, playing with it.
Sure,
it's right in some sense. It sort of strikes me as like, yeah, that's a good point.
You could look at it from like a developmental point of view, right? And it's like, how do you teach a child a virtue, And it's like they have to learn it. It's like, no, little Mark, you don't get to have ice cream for every single one of your meals, right? Yeah. Like your parents are teaching you temperance at that point, right? So like even in a developmental way of looking at it, You need other people to learn virtues. You need other people to like form you socially, right? Because you've got all these weird idiosyncratic ideas and impulses, and not many of them are going to be appropriate for the world. And you can only get that feedback by, being an annoying teenager. Uh, and having people say, when you're just kind of running your mouth like that, nobody gives you feedback. But then when you're playing the game properly, when you're participating well, we'll give you positive feedback. We'll let you into our group and into our game.
And I think that's actually, and that's actually something else that we've seen dropped out of society. And I don't know if it goes as far back as 150 years, but certainly in my generation, probably the generation before that, since at least the 60s, the idea of conscience for Christian formation and the formation of conscience has just dropped out, right? We just assume that everyone has a sense of good and evil that's equally valid, which it's not, right? I think that everyone is born with an intuitive, rough sense of good and evil, but that has to be formed. They actually have to go through this process of formation to actually grow in wisdom and grow in discernment. Like Jordan Peterson points out with Pinocchio, with the Jiminy Cricket, is originally a very bad conscience, and he has to, through the story, actually develop as a good conscience. And that's partly what Catholicism has to offer, is that conscience formation.
And Thomas Aquinas would say that the moral law is imprinted. Now, listen, if you actually studied him, Mark, you'd love Thomas Aquinas. He's super practical, right? The moral
I believe
law.
you. It's just funny. It's like, this video is sponsored by Thomas Aquinas.
It is.
It's great.
It's 100%
I love it.
sponsored by Thomas Aquinas. We need that'll be like a watermark or something.
Yeah.
You need another thing to flash on the screen. Sponsored by Thomas Aquinas. Then you can launch into his stuff.
Yeah. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to do that. So he said that the moral law is imprinted on the human soul, right? So it's not there, but the space for it to slip in there is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it won't go there until it's either taught to you explicitly or exemplified.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know what he would say about the possibility of it being permanently stunted. So I'll just stop talking then, because I don't know what he would say.
This is interesting, because this connects to modern neuroscience and cognitive science, right? What Aquinas is saying there, because like Pinker's book, The Language Instinct, in I think it's the 90s. He was talking about the whole, how the debunking the tabula rasa, particularly he uses his specialization language, and he's talking exactly about what you're talking about with what Aquinas knew 1,000 years before that, apparently, 800.
Which he picked up from Gregory the Great, or Dionysius, or the Stoics, or from Plato.
But this idea of the imprint, right, is that we're not born with language, but we're born with like an imprint that we're ready to pick up language from the environment, from, as what Marx says, from the distributed cognition. We're born ready to come out into this society.
That's affordance. That's affordance, right? Yeah. There's an affordance for language that we're born with, right? And then that's the ability to do the language, to actually perform the language, is exacted from our prehensile tongue eating device and other things, right? That's look, I'm extremely hopeful that I'm extremely hopeful that science will eventually catch up to the religious tradition that already discovered all this stuff and has been talking about it for thousands of years. Will they recognize that? That I'm not hopeful for, but I'm hopeful that they'll catch up eventually.
It would make for a better world. I could go for that.
It's extra cooling capacity. That's why we're all bald. It's like it's just we're bare metal cognition.
Yeah. Grass doesn't grow on a busy street.
Yeah.
And then my favorite is that God created a few perfect heads and then covered the rest with hair.
Yes. Can confirm also.
Oh man.
I think that there was a really good sort of final point there. this sort of idea of affordances, but there's also critical periods that we're that with language, and I think there's certain critical periods with morality too. Now, actually, something that calling out the Marxists and postmodernists, why I think Paulo Freire is a truly evil person is because he was actually, he came up with this process of conscientization, which is really the inversion of developing Christian conscience, right? So he actually found a way to de-virtue people, take away their virtues to try and make them governed purely by pathos, right? So it's in many ways it's making people wretched so that they are dependent on the system and always demanding revolution because they can't take care of things themselves. So all they can do is complain, and he's become the foundation of our modern education system, at least in North America, and now spreading more throughout the world. He messed up South America, particularly Brazil, and then he was brought over, and now he's
I don't. But look, I mean, I don't think these people know what they're doing. I mean, people assign a lot of competence and rationality and understanding to people who clearly don't have it. Like this is the problem of Sam Harris. Like he's very articulate, right? But he's actually not very bright. Like he's actually not very smart.
I agree with you. I agree with
right?
you, Sam Harris. I agree with you, Sam.
No,
Harris.
but that's
evil
everywhere.
In the same way Paulo Freire is, but Paulo Freire, he had a deep understanding here, right? Because so he actually had to understand the system well enough to say, no, this is how I can create more wretched people, more revolutionaries. It's like
but there's more than one way to do it too. But again, I mean, look, when you assign these things to single people, and then you say this guy knew what he was doing, and right, we get into
experiments like it's
okay, but lots of people did. Like Mesmer wrote a book with experiments too, and his stuff didn't actually take off, except one very famous person who took it to heart, right? So these things, like it's not inevitable that somebody wrote a book that's a well-researched book that anybody read and that anything's going to come of it, and that's where we get in this danger because people tend to fall into the scientific concept that if a thing can be done, it is inevitable, and that's false. Like it's provably false. It takes like 5 seconds to debunk. And that's the problem because we're paying attention to quantity instead of quality. And maybe all quality requires distributed cognition to understand. And that's why we outsource our sanity at the same time.
So I see that there's a battle between good and evil, that there is spiritual warfare. And there's an arms race that comes with that spiritual warfare, right? That the battle line is between on every human heart. It's between good and evil. And there is theological religions which are psychotechnology on the good side, right? Because they're helping with discernment. But there's also we're also attached to our sin, and we're also attached to evil. So there is a natural demand for psychotechnology that blocks discernment, right?
We have that already. Like this is one of my problems with John's work. He's like pretending we don't have all this stuff. We already have it. We've had it all along. Yeah. He's rebelling against it and rejecting it, but that doesn't mean we don't have it. That just means he doesn't like the answer.
So yeah, but my point is that there are people who create it with evil systems, and there are people who do this consciously. So I don't know. Like, are you? I don't. I mean. I'm not rallying because I think Paulo Freire is probably like at least a 1 in 10,000 evil, and probably a 1 in and also a 1 in 10,000 intelligence, right? Like so.
That's fine, Xander. But look, you've got B.F. Skinner, okay? I don't know if you know much about B.F. Skinner. So 90% of B.F. Skinner's work is awesome, and it's excellent, and it's really good, right? Yeah. Except he was an idealist. So what did he do? He said, you know what we can do? We can just give people positive feedback, and they'll become good people. Now, he's not the first, second, or third, but he's the first to do it in psychology. Yeah. And because he was famous for all the other excellent work that he did, people have been trying ever since that to make that work in a psychological fashion. Now, of course, I don't know why I have to explain this to people, but it seems like even the likes of Brett Weinstein do not understand some of the basics of evolution. Okay. evolution prefers negative signals, period, end of statement. Like positive signals are actually optional in an evolutionary framework. They're completely,
Okay, that's fair enough.
you
Okay.
don't need them.
I don't know
Right?
if they're completely.
Survive, which is a neutral signal. It's not a positive signal. It's not. There's three signals, right? We don't move away from pain and towards pleasure. That's nonsense. It's observably incorrect. Okay, there's three states, right? So the problem is, what do you do about B.F. Skinner? Do you say he was an evil genius who spread evil in the world? Because he wasn't. Like that's clearly not what happened, right? But that manifestation of evil, which didn't come from B.F. Skinner, but he allowed into the world and used science to forward, is now we're stuck with it to some extent. Was he an evil genius? No. Was he a genius? Yes. And see, this is the problem. Are there bad people like Sam Harris? Like I make the case that Sam Harris, because he was doing something he knew he couldn't do, and telling other people that they could do that, fully knowing he couldn't even do that, that to me is crossing a line. Okay? Period. Statement. Like, you cannot, that is over the line. If you want to tell yourself you can do something you can't do, you're just deceiving yourself. But when you get up on a stage and you have an audience and you tell everybody else they can do this thing that you know full well you can't do because it's been demonstrated to you time and time again publicly, that's crossing a line. That's judgment. There's discernment, right? That's a different case from a B.F. Skinner who's just an idealist and falls, he's a rube. He falls for a demon. And the demon manifests stupid positivity, garbage into the world.
So maybe we're like, I don't know if we're that far apart, and I maybe just be misunderstanding your points that we're getting part of. I don't think that most of the evil that's done in the world is done consciously. I think like the BF Skinner scenario is far more common, especially since any people, especially amongst great men and great people, is because if you have a disproportionate impact on the world, you're also going to have a disproportionate negative impact, because most actions in the world are going to have both a positive and negative. So if so in a B.F. Skinner scenario, of course, he's going to have, like you said, right, most of his work is essential and wonderful, but there's this negative impact that came from it as well, and part of it was from his overreaching. And all I'm saying is that there are because there is this investment in negative psychotechnology, that there are evil people, there are evil people, and there are talented people, and there are evil talented people who have written things or have had first of all, they've set out to have a negative impact on the world, and they've used their greatness to have a disparate negative impact on the world.
So, like Foucault and Derrida and others, for sure. And Heidegger, right? Yeah, Heidegger, I agree.
Yeah. But I put like Hegel and Marcuse, who came up earlier, and Fieri and Lukács in sort of a special bucket of, like, they were consciously, they knew what they were up to, and they didn't care. If you want to
look, if you want to state that they're evil and do the statement that I made about Sam Harris, then that's fine, right? Because that or Jordan Peterson's excellent and not lauded enough formulation, right? He said, there's a place, or there's a darkness so dark that you're going there to increase the darkness and do a dark thing. Yeah. Right. That is a correct formulation of evil, one of many, but one for sure. And nobody, Vervaeke and Pageau didn't say that's an excellent formulation for evil. I agree, because they were too busy defending something that is indefensible, by the way, just so we're clear.
Yeah, but Lukács and Fieri both wrote their seminal works after they had already been exiled from their countries of origin for effing things up so much, right? But they both did these failed, disastrous communist revolutions in their countries, and they were forced into exile, avoiding murder. And then people said, like, okay, these guys who destroyed their countries, let's hear what they have to say, right? Like, it's a little mind-boggling. But the stuff, So, but no, I agree fully that it's I think we've reached agreement. Like we're both in the same place now.
And I have no problem if you want to call out evil and use the formulation to prove it, right? Like, because and that is the sort of thing I'm talking about. Like, yes, we need to do more of that. We need to say this particular person, like Foucault, evil. Like, there's no there's no way around that. I'd love to hear a defense. I'd love to rip that person apart because I will, like instantaneously, because that's we're crossing the line. Like I'm a fan of thought crime if it involves harming children. I'm okay with the thought crime thing. I'm cool with it. As for that one case, I'm okay. Totally. Because I'm an extremist on this issue. I am. I know this.
Report thing?
Yeah.
Yes. Minority Report would be okay with me, not in cases of murder, but in case of harming children, then I'm fine with Minority
Report. If you don't like harming children,
I'm signing up tomorrow.
You should look into why Lukács was in exile. It's pretty nasty. Like he actually implemented what Foucault talked about doing. He actually implemented. I think it's Hungary. I forget the country that he did it, but it was basically
Well, again, yeah. I mean, if you can make the case, like I made the case with Sam Harris, the problem isn't that he couldn't do what he said he could do. The problem is it was demonstrated to him that he couldn't do what he could do, and he told other people not only that he could do it, which is a minor crime, but he said they could do it. That's crossing the line. Like you've crossed over across the zone of sin and into the zone of evil or something. And I think that's actually really important, because if we don't talk about this stuff, we can't call it out and say, no, don't listen to Foucault, he was evil. Like, don't listen to Rousseau was evil. Like, what? Like, this isn't that hard. Like, just throw out all their work. It's like, oh, but Mark, you're going to get the time wrong. The twice a day the broken clock was right. Oh, well, I think I'll live. I think I'll be fine. Like, it's okay to throw out those. Yeah. Right. It's okay to throw out the 99% bad stuff, with the 1% good stuff. It's fine. You're not going to lose much. It's okay. It's okay to have a small loss. A small loss is better than a large loss.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so you're using the words
sin and evil.
Sin and evil.
I think that was Catholics.
Right. So I mean, you're
I'm making a differentiation. What's wrong with the differentiation? Because I think that's important.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the difference is.
Well,
because sin would be kind of always some kind of evil, and we would talk about kind of grave evil and very grave evil.
I think the aim that let's see. I'll sort of try and save it and see if Mark will agree with the way that I save it. So, like I was talking about impact, right? And I'm going to actually tie it to Toby Lucan at Shopify. He would actually, which is one of Canada's few innovative billion-dollar companies, he would actually fire people based on lack of impact. So if you screwed up or you did something bad, like you did something that had a negative outcome, that wasn't what he would fire you for. It would be if you were doing nothing. It was passivity that he'd fire you for. Like he'd actually look is like, are you trying to do an impact in this company? And that so the impactful things is what he was looking for. And because he accepted the idea of like any positive impact is going to have some negative consequences with it too. So the first thing I need to weed out is the people who are having no impact. Then after I've weeded out the impactless people, I have to start looking at, okay, who are the people who are having the most positive impact? The people who are having no impact are the first ones we need to get rid of. And here is the same idea with sin. I think your distinction between sin and evil, right? So anything like people with good in their hearts, good intentions, they're going to aim at good, and they're still going to create sin. We're all sinners.
Exactly.
Right? So there's still going to be sin.
Sin's inevitable.
Sin's inevitable.
It's inevitable. Right? Evil's not inevitable.
Right. So we would. So, sorry, Xander, you go ahead and finish.
Oh yeah. So, but so the distinction Mark is making, and I think Father and Eric would phrase it differently, but I think it's sort of accept the distinction on some level, is that evil is aiming for those negative consequences. So you're actually, and even those negative consequences, like God will still use he uses the works of the devil to bring about good, and that's why the devil's always so angry. But even those so there'll be disparate impact, but the evil you're seeing is aiming at those negative consequences. What I would say, disruption of discernment and away from Christ. But you probably would frame it differently. But that's what evil is. So it's people. It's what's in your heart. If you're aiming at evil, then it's evil, and sin is sin for you is aiming at good, but there's still evil coming out of it. That's sin. Sorry, father. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's going to get into the same problem that Bishop Barron and Jordan Peterson ran into when talking about the Columbine killers. Is this idea that and it's probably has more to do with a definition of words and how we're using them than it is any actual real disagreement. But they say that evil, considered in itself, is a privation of a good thing that ought to be there, right? So it's like, let's say that I had my pinky cut off in a farm accident. That we could call that a physical evil because the form of the human person is that you would have 5 fingers on each hand. And that form has been disfigured, so we would call that a physical evil. That pinky is gone. It should have been there. So it's a privation of a do good. So they would say, I'm going to lay out the argument so that you will know the next time you're talking to a Catholic that this is an accurate map, right?
Well, I will know better than to talk to Catholics, but please go on.
Right. So that's the way we define evil, as a privation of a do good, and saying that it is the object of the rational appetite, the will, is the good. And so it's actually impossible. So the way they would talk about gravity of evil is how disordered are you getting? Right. So we could talk about different gravities of evil. We can go from less evil to more evil. There's a spectrum of quality or anti-quality. And then if you
evil inevitable.
What?
Though you're making them equally inevitable. And that's where my objection is.
How do they become?
It's on a spectrum. If evil's on a spectrum, then you're not getting to zero.
So I gotta head out now, guys.
So, I mean, see you, Xander.
But yeah,
see you, Xander. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Residuum reverter, viva Cristo Rey.
Amen. The non-being would eventually, right? If we're going to talk about evil as non-being, it would eventually get to zero, right? Like there's a point where something will dissipate and fade out of existence. So it gets to zero. Does that make sense? Am I saying things well?
No, so yeah, okay. While you're alive, you're evil. Still no. No, it's not inevitable. Evil is something that not only we bring about in the world or increase in the world. It has to be. This other formulation doesn't work. It sounds like the Christians or the Catholics in particular have caved to some to some equality doctrine somewhere down the line. Is this a bad thing?
I guess Augustine really effed this up then. Right?
Probably.
This goes back.
Yeah, probably to get around to equalize everybody and say, well, I may have been a sinner my whole life, but you were too, and therefore we're all evil together. It's like, no.
I'm really not feeling like you're engaging with the arguments right here.
No, look, if evil is inevitable, then why do you need evil and sin? They're both inevitable. Now we have an overlapping definition. Right? It's because you're not perfect. Okay, yeah, really? This is original sin is real. I didn't get the message the first time. So you're denigrating either evil or sin. I think you're denigrating evil, but and increasing sin. But I don't see the point in having overlapping definitions like that because it's not helpful, and especially it's not helpful because what it means is there's no point in fighting evil because it's inevitable. So why are we even bothering, trying to fight it at that point?
I think the way this plays itself out is in the distinction between venial sin and mortal sin. Right? They are not treated the same way inside the Catholic Church, right?
I agree, and I think that mortal sin is closer to an evil,
right.
but that still leaves you with
Which is why
that
I'm
all evil
saying
is.
this is probably more a semantic discussion than it is like an actual discussion in how we would uh, behave.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Was
So,
Foucault evil is the question. So let's get the church's opinion on was Foucault evil, like from the clip with Peterson and Vervaeke and Pageau. And this is why this is a big problem for me. When somebody comes up with a good formulation for evil and they state it and they make their case, you should pat them on the head, give them a cookie, and throw them a parade and point out to everybody that happened. Because it's really important. Like, it's fantastically important because it's the one thing we're not doing with effective altruism and all these other ridiculous substitutions for ethics. And if the church isn't going to do that, then like we're doomed. Like, I actually mean, like, we are actually doomed. The church should be like, yes, Peterson, you're correct. Go, boy, go. And by the way, everybody else, listen to this kind of a formulation. Not listen to everything Jordan Peterson says, that's fine, but listen to this formulation. This man, when he says this thing is absolutely right, pay attention to that because this is important. Like, because that is the most important job right there.
I think so. So here it goes. Foucault was evil.
Thank you.
There you go. I had a second point in there. Where did it go? Yeah. So I actually find the idea of evil and let's say a deeper gravity of evil and deeper depravity as a more and more profound inversion of what's actually good versus an apparent good. As I find that really compelling in order to understand how people can behave internally, right? So we could think of what would be motivating somebody to do horrible things to children. Um, and the way I've been able to try and think about it in a helpful way is to say that they get, let's say, maybe some kind of physical pleasure and sense of power and security in doing so, right? Now that is completely not how human beings are supposed to behave, that there is an order and that a child shouldn't have to suffer so that you could experience those things, right? So absolutely wrong. I don't think it's even psychologically possible to aim into the darkness, right? Like to into
No,
the
that was Peterson's point, is that you can aim into the darkness. Like, that's his whole point with Foucault. He said,
right,
there's
so
a place so dark that you know that you're in the darkness and you know you're going there to do dark things.
Yeah. I'm just not sure. So the way we could take the Columbine killers, right? Well, that was the example he brought up, and we're all
Right.
Peterson.
No, it's a good
We're
one.
all Peterson fans. Is that they had this projection of what they thought a good world should look like, right? And then they compared that projection to what they actually experienced, and they decided they were going to punish the world, but based on that projection of what their idea of a just utopian society would look like. So that was actually the good they were tending to, but completely upside down because your imaginations and fantasies shouldn't.
Yeah, you have to assume the incorrectness of Plato, who was wrong about at least one thing, and this is certainly something he was absolutely provably wrong about, which is that everybody seeks the good. And that's not true. Some people say, my life is hell, and I want more people with me because I want to increase my tribe. And so they would rather make hell for the people who aren't in it to feel as though they are not alone. Like that definitely happens. People do this all the time. You can just observe it in real life. Like you don't need some grand narrative about the Columbine shooting. And the problem with these formulations is that it's a cute formulation, right? But I can tell you for a fact it is wrong. It's absolutely wrong. I've met people, I know people, I've been to places in my own mind. There are times when you say this world is not good enough and therefore it's got to go. Okay, there's no goodness in that statement. You can't make the argument that because you're comparing it against some ridiculous utopia that you're going for the good, because you're not going for the good. If you were going for the good, you'd say the thing wrong with this world is that I'm stuck in hell, so I'm just going to kill myself. Yeah, fair enough. Maybe in that case you're going for the good, but not I'm going to take everybody with me. Now you're definitely not trying to enact the good in any way, shape, or form. And look, it may be a translation problem with Plato's stuff. I don't know. My lobes got stolen. Otherwise, I could look it up for my damn self, or at least have some chance of understanding it. Right. So it's just a wrong formulation. It's clearly not the best explanation. It's not the only explanation, and it's not the correct explanation. And there's lots of formulations like that where you can always turn it into something that looks like someone's going towards the good. But that's the fact that you can do that is just postmodern gobbledygook in my mind, and it's not valid. Some people are trying to enact evil on this earth, whether consciously or unconsciously, right, through possession or not, and sometimes not. And the Columbine kids, they weren't possessed; they were oppressed, and they wanted people to join them in the hell that they had been feeling. And fair enough. I mean, that happened, but they were not trying to enact the good. And the fact that they may have been saying, well, these people have a good life and we don't, and we're doing a comparison, doesn't mean they're going towards the good, even if the comparison is there. That's not correct.
No, they're not going towards the good. They're going towards a good that appears to them, which is not the same thing.
No, they're not going towards a good that appears to them. They're saying, I want to bring everybody down to my level. People do this all the time. People say, okay, I know what the good is, and it's way up here, and I can't get there. And so I want more friends where I'm at, so I'm going to do whatever. And people do this. So I've had several friends over the years, right? Some of them are drug users, right? Some of them are alcoholics. Some of them are what you might call sex addicts, right? Every single one of them has said, hey, you need to do a drink, or hey, why don't you come down? We're going to do some coke, or whatever. Like every single one of them. It's never not happened. Not once. Now, it doesn't work because I go, yeah, no thanks, dude. I'm cool. And, normally people are like, oh, people pressure people into it. No one ever tries to pressure me into anything like that. Why? Because I'm an ideal and they know it. And they know that they wish that they had the willpower that I have on those things anyway. Certainly not all things, because I'm a glutton. For example, so you put food in front of me, I'm going to eat all of it. Don't put a lot of food in front of me, I'll get sick. So I'm not claiming to be some paragon of virtue with respect to a large number of things, we'll say. But certainly I'm anti-drug, I'm anti-alcohol, and I'm anti what would you call it, casual sex or whatever, right? Like those things are all no's for me. And I can hold the line on all of them. There's lots of things I can't hold the line on, but those three things I can hold the line on. But they know it, and they respond positively to it, and they drink less and do fewer drugs and do less casual sex when I'm around, actually. And I know this for a fact, and they know it. And in fact, they usually say that. Like they're aware of what's going on, and they're aware that when they're like, hey, come on and do this with me, that what they're trying to do is normalize their own behavior. In other words, they want to enact bad things in the world so that they feel less bad, because there's more people doing bad things. Therefore, it's the norm. Therefore, it's not so bad. But that's all about the bad that they know they're doing. There's no good in that equation whatsoever, except there's a point of comparison of where they're falling short.
Sure.
Plato, incorrect.
So if I said to you that the good that a person who's doing evil is merely illusory and has no substance in the real world, does that change? I mean, it's an illusory good. It's not actually okay. So
no. Well,
Okay,
look,
don't explain it again because I heard it the first time.
no, you meant it for evil, and God, meant it for good. Like, problem solved. And also, perfection doesn't exist. So if you're trying to be a perfectly evil person all the time or something, you're gonna fail. Like I said, like Rousseau was right about a couple of things, right? But so what? That doesn't mean you listen to anything that he says, because he was only right about a couple of things. Same with Foucault. This is an easy equation. It's like, yeah, you have to look at the balance. You have to make it, there has to be discernment, and you have to make a judgment. And then you have to use that judgment wisely. Do I read Foucault? No, I'm not going to read Foucault and Derrida. Why? Why would anybody do that? Just don't do that. They're bad people. Like, it's not hard. You don't need it. The world was spinning before them too. Like, obviously they didn't add anything that added anything to the world, because the world existed before them. It's not that hard.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think in most situations, regarding discernment between good and evil, you and I would make similar judgments.
Probably.
Um,
Yeah, I can't imagine why with a at least nominally Catholic upbringing, right? Without the church, but still, like, to Tom Holland's point, it's still the water you're swimming in, kid. Like, you're not getting out of that.
right, and I think we're both aiming in the same direction.
Well, I'm aiming for the good, and look, my thesis is that it's possible to not aim for the good, and most people aren't aiming, and that's fine too. Like, there's a big neutral space; it's probably the biggest space. The smallest space is the good, right? But then there's a huge, and maybe it's bigger, but I don't think so. But it might be. There's a huge space of evil that is there, right? And that's why the good and evil are not opposites, because there's way more evil than good. Right? That's why they can't be opposites. It's not a binary. It's not we'll find the worst evil and we'll move away from it, and therefore we'll be moving to the good. That's wrong. That's just
everything that rises
a lie.
must converge.
Right. Well, the convergence of the good is important, and it's important to aim for the good. Like, that's the most important thing.
Evil dissipates itself.
Exactly.
It spins itself out into non-being. Yeah.
And
so anyway,
things that dissipate are also evil, Father Eric. That's the other thing that you have to recognize, because that's the hell we're living in. Is everybody's values are dissipating, right? My highest value is X, and my highest value is Y, and my highest value is Z. That's a dissipation. And so it's leading us not just to chaos, but also to evil.
Okay. Well, as long as you're willing to say that Plato, Aristotle, Plotinus, Augustine, and Aquinas were all wrong, I think we could just leave the disagreement on the table as a semantic and mostly theoretical matter, because
everyone's wrong about something.
Yeah.
Right? It's important to know what your philosophers are wrong about, or you shouldn't adopt their philosophy.
Okay. You're not going to overturn a decade of seminary formation overnight, Mark.
No, and I'm not trying to, right? But this is why I try not to touch Carl Jung, because I know he's wrong about something, and I have no freaking idea what it is. So I'm terrified of all his work. Literally, I'm just terrified of all of it, because I can't figure out where he went wrong.
With a shard of glass in it.
Right, exactly. Well, and that, to me, and that is it. Like, if you don't know where your favorite philosopher went wrong, then maybe you should avoid that philosophy until you figure it out, right? Because otherwise it's going to lead you astray for sure. And knowing when things are wrong is really important. And that is the one signal we get from evolution that's the most important, is the negative signal.
Sure. I guess the little bridge I'm trying to build here is that we would tend to behave a lot in the same ways, I think, even if we disagree about what the nature of ultimate evil is.
Right, except the important thing that people will miss is they'll use this idea that everybody's going for the good to avoid the responsibility of judging their actions after the fact, not in the future, after the fact, and making a call on good and evil in the world so that we can use distributed cognition on evil. Because if we're not talking about evil, there's no distributed cognition on evil, and now nobody understands evil, and then everybody will get tricked by the devil. Like that's literally part of the case that I made to Vanderklay is about tolerance. It's like when everything is tolerable, and we very much entered that realm, or at least passed an important line of entering that realm. Suddenly, you think story time with transvestites or whatever the heck it's called is okay, right? And I don't think there's any version of the universe where that's okay, should be tolerated, should be accepted, should be allowed. No, we've clearly crossed a line there. It's not ambiguous at all. But because people are going like, well, you know what, according to Plato, everybody's doing what they think is best in the world, and therefore they're enacting some kind of a good. Okay, maybe they're enacting some kind of a good, but maybe that good is only for them. And I'm not interested in a good that's only for you. So piss off. Like, I think that's actually super important. We got to talk about evil. And if we're not ready, willing, and able to do that because we're paying attention to people who didn't want to deal with the hard problem of evil, then that's a problem for me.
I have more thoughts. I also have work tomorrow.
I understand, sir. I appreciate your patience with my ranting.
I hope the whole rest of YouTube is patient as well. Happy Sunday, everybody. Thanks for showing up. I plan on doing this again next week. So all 7 of you, see you next week. Take care.
God bless.